Xylo of the Cathar, senior logistics analyst for the Galactic Commerce Guild, adjusted the magnification on his primary data screen. His 3 hearts beat a slow, synchronous rhythm, a meter of placid efficiency that was the pride of his species. Before him, the holographic display of Sector Gamma 9 shimmered, a celestial tapestry woven with the golden threads of approved shipping lanes. These lanes were the lifeblood of the Guild, meticulously calculated over centuries to provide the optimal balance of speed and safety. They were beautiful in their predictability. They were sane. Then there was the crimson slash that had just appeared, a vessel deviating. Xylo said, his voice a low thrum that resonated pleasantly in the sterile air of the monitoring station on Citadel Prime. Bring up the registry for transponder 77 Delta Niner. They've strayed from the designated corridor above the Uit cloud of Xylos. His junior analyst, Telek, a younger Cathar whose mandibles still showed the sheen of recent molting, swiveled in his suspension chair. His movements were quicker, less deliberate than Xylo's. Right away, senior analyst. A few deft manipulations of his own console and the data flowed onto the main screen. It's a human vessel, sir. Registered name. Errant Venture. Service provider. Planet Express. Xylo's antennae twitched in mild irritation. Humans. Of course. In the 2 centuries since humanity had burst onto the galactic scene, they had proven to be a consistent source of procedural anomalies. Their expansion was explosive, their technology a bizarre patchwork of elegant theory and brute force pragmatism, and their psychology a closed book written in a language no one else could decipher. Planet Express, Xylo mused, testing the name. It was absurdly simplistic. Most established shipping conglomerates had names that evoked reliability and power, like the Vitar Secure Transit Authority or the GNEC Interstellar Haulage Hegemony. Planet Express sounded like a service that delivered potted flora. And their destination, a private orbital habitat above Xylo's 7, senior analyst. The manifest lists a single item. 1 crate of vintage Earth whiskey, 25 years aged. Xylo processed this. Xylo's 7 was a gas giant with a notoriously turbulent magnetosphere. Standard procedure was a wide-berth approach, a week-long journey spiraling into the system to avoid the worst of the radiation belts. The errant venture was cutting directly across the system's plane. Their projected travel time was less than 2 days. Their projected survival rate, according to every guild algorithm, was less than 17%. They are flying through the grinder's maw, Telek said, his voice tight with a tension unbefitting a Cathar. The grinder's maw was the unofficial but universally accepted name for the densest asteroid field in the sector. It was not a place for ships. It was a place where ships went to cease being ships. They are doing it to save 5 days on a delivery of fermented grain solvent, Xylo corrected, his tone dry. Patch their external sensors to the main viewer. I wish to document the inevitable. Documenting failure was a crucial part of refining the Guild's safety protocols. This would be a valuable, if grim, data point. The view shifted. The serene starfield was replaced by a chaotic jumble of rock and ice. The errant venture was a small, ungainly ship, looking more like a collection of mismatched modules than a purpose-built vessel. It plunged into the maelstrom. Xylo braced himself for the telltale flare of a hull breach, the silent shriek of atmosphere venting into the void. Instead, the ship danced. It wasn't the elegant, pre-calculated ballet of a Guild-certified pilot navigating a minor debris field. This was frantic, instinctive, and utterly insane. The ship's maneuvering thrusters fired in short, unpredictable bursts, kicking the stern sideways to avoid a tumbling mountain of iron ore. It used the gravity well of a larger asteroid to slingshot itself past a cluster of smaller, faster-moving rocks. At one point, Xylo watched in stunned disbelief as the ship deliberately angled its forward shields to bounce off a car-sized chunk of ice, using the impact to alter its trajectory. By the Great Filter, what are they doing? Telek whispered. Their proximity alerts must be a continuous scream. The stress on the pilot. Bring up their internal comms channel, Xylo commanded, his own hearts now beating a slightly faster, discordant rhythm. Filtered for the command deck, speakers crackled to life. There was no screaming, no panicked commands. There was music, a rhythmic pounding sound with a wailing human voice laid over it. And beneath that, a single human voice, calm and slightly bored. "Yeah, Brenda, I know the quarterly reports are due. No, I can't exactly look at them right now." Bit of a bumpy ride. A pause, punctuated by the loud clang of a minor impact against the hull. "No, that was just a fender bender. Listen, I'll call you back when I'm out of this gravel pit. Just tell accounting if they want their booze, they have to wait for me to park." "Okay, bye." The comm channel went silent, save for the thumping music. Xylo stared at the screen, his mandibles slightly agape. Fender bender, gravel pit. The pilot, who the registry identified as Captain Fry, was not only navigating a lethal hazard that would have sent a Cathar pilot into catatonic shock, but he was doing so while having a mundane conversation about administrative paperwork. He had trivialized a life-threatening crisis into a workplace inconvenience. The errant venture emerged from the grinder's maw 2 hours later, its hull pockmarked and dented, one of its secondary communication arrays sheared off, but otherwise intact. It had shaved 5 days and 6 hours off its delivery time. Xylo updated the survival probability algorithm with the new data. The system flickered, attempting to reconcile the outcome with the input, and then flashed a single, unhelpful word. "Anomaly, senior analyst," Telek said softly. "Their efficiency rating for this run, it's 400% above the sector average." "At a risk factor of 900% above acceptable limits," Xylo countered, though the words felt hollow. The risk had not manifested. The efficiency had. This was the human paradox. They broke every rule of sensible operation, yet they succeeded, often spectacularly. This was not an isolated incident. Xylo's private files were filled with them. There was the incident with the Starhopper Express courier, who, faced with a planetary blockade during the Cygnian Civil War, had landed his ship in the middle of an active volcano. He then used a heat-shielded ground vehicle to drive the package, a collection of rare seeds for a xenobotanist, through the war zone, disguised as a lava flow. His only comment in the official post-delivery report was, "Traffic was light." Then there was the warp speed parcel, agent who needed to deliver a vital medical component to a colony struck by a fast-acting plague. The planet's spaceport was disabled. Instead of turning back, the human had put the component inside a specialized atmospheric entry pod, wrapped it in her own emergency EVA suit for extra padding, and simply dropped it from orbit. She had calculated the trajectory by eye, using cloud formations as a reference. The pod had landed less than 100 meters from the colony's medical center. When hailed by a frantic guild official demanding to know her protocol, she had replied, "The protocol is get the thing to the people who need the thing." Seemed like the fastest way. The Cathar, and indeed to most of the 37 species in the Commerce Guild, protocol was sacrosanct. It was a shield against the endless, clawing chaos of the universe. It was the collected wisdom of generations, a bulwark against the million things that could go wrong. Humans seemed to treat protocol as a mild suggestion, a starting point for improvisation. Xylo spent the next cycle compiling his findings. He cross-referenced every human-run delivery service in the Guild's records. The pattern was consistent. Planet Express, Starhopper, Warp Speed Parcel, a dozen others with equally ludicrous names. All of them exhibited a tolerance for risk that bordered on suicidal. All of them posted efficiency and success rates that were, statistically speaking, impossible. They delivered packages through solar flares, into the gravity wells of black holes, and onto planets whose fauna considered metal-hulled ships a primary food source. He focused on the pilots and couriers themselves. He pulled up their physiological data, available through standard guild registration. Bipedal, symmetrical, carbon-based, respiration cycle dependent on an oxygen-nitrogen mix. Their home world, Earth, was a chaotic mess of weather extremes, tectonic instability, and a biosphere so viciously competitive it had produced billions of species, only a fraction of which had ever survived to be catalogued. It was a Class 4 death world by guild standards. Most sentient life arose on calmer, more stable planets. The Cathar home world, Cathar Prime, was a model of geological and meteorological serenity. It had allowed them to develop logic and order without the constant, pressing distraction of needing to survive the planet itself. Could that be it? Was their origin the key? Did surviving such a tumultuous cradle forge them into this? He brought his findings to the Council of Analysts. They listened patiently, their antennae still, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the data streams Xylo presented. He showed them the flight path of the errant venture. He played them the audio of Captain Fry. He detailed a dozen other instances of what he had termed catastrophic success. High Analyst Z-Core, a venerable Cathar whose carapace was faded with age, processed the information for a full minute in silence. His three hearts were a barely perceptible murmur. "Your conclusion, Senior Analyst Xylo?" Z-Core finally asked. "My conclusion," Xylo said, choosing his words with care, "is that our models for risk assessment are fundamentally incompatible with human psychology. We assume all sentient species are risk-averse. We assume a desire for self-preservation is the prime directive. The humans operate on a different axis entirely. They do not seem to calculate risk. They seem to embrace it. They do not fear chaos. They thrive in it. It is as if they possess an unknown variable, some biological or psychological advantage that allows them to function in environments that should, by all logic, destroy them." "Is not an advantage," muttered Analyst Pilar from the side. "It is a flaw. They are lucky. A species-wide streak of improbable luck. It will not last." "Respect, Analyst Pilar," Xylo countered. "Luck does not account for a 400% efficiency increase across an entire sector. Luck does not explain how a pilot can manually calculate an orbital drop through a hurricane. This is something else, something we are not equipped to understand." Z-Core's central eye blinked slowly. "Your recommendation?" "I recommend a full-spectrum study. A joint commission. We need to bring in xenobiologists, psychosociologists, perhaps even philosophers. We are treating this as a logistics problem, but I believe it is a biological one. We must understand the human variable. If we do not, their unpredictable methods will either shatter our entire commerce network or render it obsolete." The council chambers were silent again. The idea was radical. To suggest that Cathar logic was insufficient was borderline heresy. But the data was undeniable. The crimson slash of the errant venture was still burned into the star map in Xylo's mind, a symbol of a beautiful, orderly system being violated by a chaotic, inexplicable success. The study was approved, and so began the search for what made the humans tick, a search that would lead Xylo down a path far stranger and more terrifying than any asteroid field. He had thought he was studying a rival logistics model. He was about to discover he was studying a predator. The commission was a motley assembly, a microcosm of the galactic community's bewilderment. Xylo represented Cathar logic. He was joined by a Vishan, a small, bird-like species with wide, perpetually startled eyes, named Dr. Aris. The Vishans were a prey species from a world of megafauna. Their entire culture was built around evasion, camouflage, and threat detection. Dr. Aris was a xenobiologist specializing in survival instincts. There was also a G-neck philosopher, a silicon-based lifeform who communicated in shifting crystalline patterns, and a handful of other specialists. Their first subject of intense study was a human named Mike, a courier for Quickie Mart deliveries. His ship, the Parcel Post, was a battered mid-range hauler currently docked at Citadel Prime for refueling. Mike had agreed to a series of interviews in exchange for a substantial payment, and bizarrely, a guaranteed supply of something called coffee. Xylo and Dr. Aris observed the first interview from behind a one-way observation panel. Mike was of average height for his species, with a scattering of brown hair and a weary expression. He sat slumped in the interview chair, sipping the dark, steaming beverage the guild had provided. The G-neck philosopher began, its light patterns forming complex queries about the nature of existence and the value of a single life versus the completion of a task. Mike squinted at the shimmering crystal. "Look, pal, I'm just trying to get this box of cryosplicers to Rigel 5 before they thaw. You get paid, I get paid. The guys on Rigel get their gizmos. Everyone's happy. I'm not really thinking about my place in the cosmic tapestry, you know. I'm thinking about that weird rattle in the number 2 engine, and whether I have enough fuel to avoid the pirate checkpoint at Altair." The G-neck pulsed a pattern of confusion. The pirate checkpoint at Altair was a known kill zone. Avoiding it was not a matter of fuel, but of taking a 3-week detour. Mike spoke of it as if it were a traffic jam on a surface road. Doctor. Aris leaned closer to Xylo, his feathers ruffled in agitation. Did you see his eyes when the G-neck began its query? They narrowed, Xylo noted. A standard sign of concentration. No, Aris chirped, his voice low and intense. Not concentration, assessment. He wasn't trying to understand the philosophy, he was trying to figure out if the G-neck was a threat, a waste of his time, or an obstacle to his goal. His eyes, look at them. They are not wide and round like a Cathar's, designed to absorb maximum information from a stable environment. They are not side-mounted like a Vision's, for maximum peripheral awareness of approaching danger. They are set forward in his skull, close together. For binocular vision, Xylo said, it grants superior depth perception. It grants superior depth perception for one purpose, Aris corrected. To track a target, to judge the distance to a meal. They are the eyes of a predator. Xylo felt a cold knot form in his primary stomach. A predator? Humans were social, tool-using, and capable of great empathy. They weren't snarling beasts. That's a significant leap, Doctor. Many species have forward-facing eyes. Do they also possess the human capacity for endurance? Your report mentioned their home world. They evolved to run their prey to death. Persistence hunting. Not a quick ambush, but a relentless, grinding pursuit over vast distances until the target simply collapses from exhaustion. Does that sound familiar, analyst? Xylo thought of the errant venture not giving up, not turning back, but relentlessly pushing through the grinder's maw. He thought of the courier dropping a package from orbit, a new tactic when the old one was exhausted. He thought of the pilot driving through a war zone. It was not a quick, clean solution. It was a grinder. A persistence hunt. Watch his posture, Aris whispered, gesturing with a wingtip. He is relaxed but not truly at rest. His muscles are coiled. He is perpetually ready to move, to spring. My species, we have two states. Placid calm or panicked flight. This human exists in a third state, a sort of patient readiness. The state of a creature waiting by a water hole. Over the next few days, the evidence mounted, each piece slotting into Aris's terrifying hypothesis. They analyzed human physiology in more detail. Their omnivorous dentition, capable of both grinding plants and tearing flesh. Their hands, perfect for grappling and for manipulating tools with lethal precision. Their vocalizations, capable of a huge range of sounds, from soothing social bonding calls to a sudden, startling roar that could freeze a prey animal in its tracks. They reviewed more delivery logs. A human courier for same-day shipping was forced down on a jungle planet inhabited by pack-hunting reptilians. The ship's logs were recovered later. The human, a female named Ripley, hadn't hidden. She hadn't tried to camouflage herself. The logs showed she had scavenged parts from her ship, booby-trapped the entire perimeter of the crash site, and then actively hunted the hunters. She had eliminated the entire pack one by one before signaling for rescue. Her only injury was a sprained ankle. The delivery, a set of geological survey tools, was still in her possession, undamaged. The package is the prey, Aris chirped, his voice trembling with a kind of horrified awe. I see it now. The entire structure of their delivery services is a sublimated hunt. The contract is the initiation of the chase. The route is the hunting ground. Obstacles, asteroids, pirates, wars, storms are not seen as existential threats. They are seen as environmental challenges or rival predators competing for the same kill. The calm demeanor, the lack of panic, Xylo trailed off, the implication dawning on him, is not calmness, Aris finished. It is focus. The focus of a predator on the final stage of a chase. Panic is a prey response. It is the brain being overwhelmed by threat signals, forcing a desperate flight. A predator's brain does not get overwhelmed by the chase. That is what it is for. The more chaotic the situation, the more intensely it focuses on the single, overriding goal. Secure the target. G-neck philosopher, having processed the new theory, pulsed a new query to the commission. Its light was tinged with a deep, contemplative blue. If this is true, then their entire civilization is built on a predatory imperative. Their economic models, their social structures, their art, is it all a translation of the hunt? Is a hostile corporate takeover not just a pack of predators taking down a rival? Is a courtroom battle not a stylized, non-lethal fight for dominance? Xylo felt his three hearts thrumming out of sync. He looked back at Mike in the interview room. Mike had finished his coffee and was now idly trying to balance a stylus on its end on the table. He was bored. He was a creature of the hunt, trapped in a cage of quiet conversation. No wonder he took the dangerous routes. The safe routes, the golden lanes of the Cathar, must feel like a kind of slow starvation to him. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Tilek, his young assistant, had been tasked with researching human culture, looking for corroborating data. He entered the commission chamber, his antennae vibrating with excitement. Senior Analyst, Dr. Aris. I believe I have found something of significance. It's their entertainment, their stories. He projected a series of images and video clips onto the main screen. They were bewildering. A human male in primitive armor fighting a fire-breathing reptile. A group of humans in a wheeled vehicle being pursued by a colossal prehistoric beast. A lone human in a darkened structure being stalked by a biomechanical monstrosity. Their myths, their legends, their most popular forms of fiction, Tilek explained, are overwhelmingly concerned with one thing: being hunted, but they portray themselves as the heroes, the survivors, the ones who turn the tables on the monster. Aris flapped his wings. Of course, it makes perfect sense. They are an apex predator from a world teeming with other predators. They are the monster that hunted other monsters. Their greatest fear, their most thrilling fantasy, is to be cast in the role of prey and then reassert their dominance. It's a game to them. It sharpens their instincts. Xylo looked at the screen, then at the data from the courier Ripley who had hunted the pack hunters, then at the flight log of Captain Fry who had navigated the grinder's maw. It all snapped into place with a horrifying, crystalline clarity. The Commerce Guild was not dealing with a species of reckless logistics experts. They were dealing with a species that had killed everything that tried to kill them on their own planet, and upon reaching the stars, had gotten bored and turned logistics into the most dangerous game in the galaxy, simply for the fun of it. The universe was their new hunting ground, and a package with a destination was their new prey. Xylo turned to Aris. Doctor, what is the standard prey response when it identifies an apex predator it cannot outrun or hide from? Doctor. Aris's wide, dark eyes met his. The Vision's instinctive, ancestral fear was now a palpable presence in the room. There are two responses, Aris said softly: submission or attempted domestication. You try to make yourself more useful to the predator alive than dead. Xylo's report to the High Council was the most difficult document he had ever composed. He could not simply write, "The humans are predators. We are all going to be eaten." That would incite galactic panic. The Cathar abhorred panic. He had to frame it in a way his logical, ordered people could understand. He had to translate instinct into data. He titled the report, "Analysis of Human Persistence Thresholds and Their Application to High-Risk Logistical Operations." Avoided the word predator. Instead, he used phrases like species with a highly developed pursuit instinct, innate capacity for dynamic problem-solving, and a psychological framework that interprets systemic chaos as stimulus rather than threat. He detailed the forward-facing eyes not as a weapon, but as a biological tool for unparalleled target focus. He described their endurance as a biochemical advantage for long-duration, high-stress tasks, argued that human recklessness was not recklessness at all. It was a form of calculus so alien to the Cathar that they couldn't recognize it. A Cathar pilot sees an asteroid field and calculates the probability of impact. A human pilot sees an asteroid field and calculates the trajectory of the individual rocks, treating each one as a data point in a fluid, solvable equation. The Cathar saw 100% chance of failure. The human saw 1,000 tiny opportunities for success. His recommendation was even more radical than his first one. He did not recommend sanctions or containment. He recommended partnership. Doctor. Aris's words echoed in his mind. Make yourself more useful alive than dead. We cannot compete with the humans in chaotic environments, Xylo wrote in his conclusion. To try is to invite disaster. Our strength is in order, in stability, in the construction of systems that minimize chaos. Their strength is in the mastery of chaos itself. Therefore, the most logical course of action is not competition, but symbiosis. We should cede all high-risk, variable heavy transport to human operators. Let them handle the grinders' maws and the war zones of the galaxy. In return, we provide them with the infrastructure, the data, the stable systems that allow them to launch their chaotic endeavors. We build the stable waterhole. Let them do the hunting. The report sent shockwaves through the guild. Pilar, the analyst who had dismissed the humans as merely lucky, accused Xylo of species traitorism. High Analyst Zcor, however, was silent for 3 full days after reading the report, his 3 hearts beating in a complex, unreadable arrhythmia. The debate might have raged for decades, mired in Cathar procedural caution. But the universe, as it often did, forced the issue. A distress call, faint and desperate, echoed across the galactic comms network. A research outpost on Kepler 186f, a remote world nestled inside a treacherous nebula known as the Veil of Madness, had suffered a catastrophic cascade failure of its life support systems. The Veil was a ship killer, a swirling vortex of gravimetric distortions and charged plasma that scrambled sensors and tore hulls apart. Worse, it was inhabited by crystalline entities, semi-sentient electromagnetic beings that were drawn to the energy signatures of starships, which they would then encase and consume. No one went into the Veil. It was a galactic dead end. The outpost had 300 souls on board, including a number of prominent scientists from several guild species. They needed a specific series of replacement regulators, bulky and delicate, to repair their systems. They had less than a week of breathable air left. The guild put out an emergency contract. The reward was astronomical, enough to buy a small moon. The Vitar Secure Transit Authority refused. Their probability models showed a 0.001% chance of success. The GNEC hegemony declined, stating the attempt was illogical. One by one, every reputable, sane shipping service in the galaxy turned down the contract. Xylo sat in the monitoring station, watching the rejections pile up. Tilek fidgeted beside him, his youthful confidence eroded by the grim reality. Dr. Aris had joined them, unable to stay away. "They are going to die," Aris chirped, his feathers flat with despair. "All those people. Because we are too afraid, because we are prey." "We are not prey," Xylo corrected, his voice flat. "We are simply logical. The logic dictates that sacrificing one ship and crew to attempt a rescue with a near-zero probability of success is an inefficient use of resources." Even as he said it, the words tasted like ash. Then, a new notification pinged on the contract board. One acceptance. Xylo zoomed in on the registry. He was not surprised. Ship, parcel post. Service, Quickie Mart deliveries. Pilot, Mike. The comms channel opened. It was a guild dispatcher, a nervous Cathar whose voice trembled. "Courier Mike, you understand the conditions. The Veil of Madness." Mike's voice crackled back, as weary and unimpressed as ever. "Yeah, I read the travel advisory. Nasty bit of weather. The pay's good, though. Got the regulators loaded up. Should be there in, say, 4 days. Depends on the traffic." The Cathar dispatcher was speechless. Mike cut the connection. Xylo rerouted every available sensor array to track the parcel post. The entire commission, and now High Analyst Zcor himself, gathered in the observation room. This was the ultimate test of his theory. The parcel post, that ugly, reliable brick of a ship, approached the edge of the Veil. On the view screen, the nebula was a terrifying, beautiful vortex of purple and blue energies. It looked like a god's bruise on the fabric of space. "He's not slowing down," Tilek murmured. "He's accelerating," Aris corrected, his beak slightly open. The parcel post plunged in. The view from its external cameras became a nightmare. The stars vanished, replaced by whipping tendrils of plasma. The ship groaned and shuddered, its shields flickering wildly. Proximity alerts for the crystalline entities began to strobe on the data feed. They were huge, multifaceted beings of pure energy converging on the ship. "He cannot outrun them," Zcor stated, his voice a low rumble. "His ship is too slow." "He's not trying to outrun them," Xylo breathed, his eyes locked on the tactical display. "Look at his energy readings." Mike wasn't pushing his engines to their limit. He was diverting power, charging a massive capacitor somewhere in the ship's engineering bay. "What is he doing?" Tilek asked. On the comms, they heard Mike's voice not to the guild but to his ship's computer. "Okay, Betty, on my mark. Give me a 3-second countdown. We're gonna try that thing we talked about." A calm, synthesized female voice replied, "That thing is not in any standard operational manual, Mike." "Yeah, well, neither is flying through a ghost party. Just do it, on my mark, Mark." The parcel post did something no sane engineer would ever design a ship to do. It vented its entire plasma coolant system directly into its main deflector dish, which was aimed backwards. The result was a colossal, undirected burst of raw energy, a blinding white flare that erupted from the rear of the ship. The crystalline entities, creatures of energy, recoiled from the sudden, chaotic blast. Their forms wavered and distorted. For a precious few seconds, their pursuit was broken, but the maneuver had come at a cost. The ship's engines overloaded and went dead. The parcel post was now adrift deep inside the veil. "He has failed," Pilar, who had come to witness the disaster, said with grim satisfaction. "His recklessness has doomed him." "No," Aris whispered. "Listen." Mike's voice came over the comms again, impossibly calm. "Well, that got their attention. Betty, how's the reboot sequence on the engines?" 47 seconds, Mike. 47 seconds. "Great, plenty of time for a coffee." There was a shuffling sound, then the distinct clink of a ceramic mug being placed on a console. Xylo stared. The human was on a dead ship, surrounded by hostile energy beings, and he was taking a beverage break. It wasn't bravado, it was a routine. It was the calm of the hunter waiting for the prey to make a mistake. The chaos was not a crisis, it was the board on which the game was played. The crystalline entities began to regroup. 47 seconds was an eternity. They started to close in again, their forms solidifying. "He miscalculated," Zikor rumbled. "I do not think so," Xylo replied, pointing to a small, almost insignificant detail on the tactical display. A solar flare was erupting from a dwarf star near the edge of the nebula. Its radiation would wash over this section of the veil in approximately 30 seconds. Mike had not been waiting just for his engines. He had been waiting for the flare. "Betty, is it Christmas yet?" Mike asked. "Solar flare will reach our position in 5 seconds. Engines will be online in 10 seconds. The timing will be suboptimal, Mike." "Suboptimal is my middle name," Mike muttered. "Get ready to punch it the second we have ignition. Steer us into the flare's shadow. Use that big crystal bastard on the port side as an umbrella." The wave of radiation hit. The crystalline entities, hypersensitive to electromagnetic energy, convulsed. Their forms dissolved into shimmering static. At that exact moment, the parcel post's engines roared back to life. Mike steered the ship into the lee of the largest, stunned entity, using its immense crystalline body as a shield against the worst of the flare. When the flare subsided, the parcel post was gone, streaking deeper into the veil toward Kepler 186f. The entities were scattered and disoriented. He had used the nebula's own dangers against each other. 3 days later, the message came. The regulators were delivered. The outpost was saved. The parcel post was en route back to Citadel Prime. Its return message consisted of a single invoice and a short note. "Ran out of coffee. Please have a fresh pot ready. Thanks, Mike." Silence reigned in the Cathar observation room. Pilar's mandibles were clamped shut in disbelief. Tilek was looking at the screen with something approaching religious reverence. High Analyst Zikor turned his central eye toward Xylo. For the first time, Xylo saw not just logic in that ancient eye, but a flicker of something else. Understanding, perhaps even a sliver of fear. "Report, Senior Analyst Xylo," Zikor said, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the deck plates. "It is insufficient." Xylo's 3 hearts sank. "It is insufficient," Zikor repeated, "because it is too conservative. Your proposal for partnership is logical, but it does not go far enough. We are not their partners. We are their quartermasters, their enablers. We will build the roads, maintain the registries, and process the payments. We will handle the order, and the humans, we will let them handle the chaos." He paused, looking at the static-filled screen where a lone, battered ship had just rewritten the rules of the universe. "Begin drafting the Human Logistics Integration Treaty," Zikor commanded. "And someone get that pilot his coffee. It would seem that the most valuable commodity in the galaxy is no longer spice, or fuel, or precious metals. It is the focused, unyielding persistence of a predator on the hunt. Xylo bowed his head in acknowledgement, a profound sense of realignment shifting the very foundations of his worldview. He looked at the star chart, at the neat, golden lines of Cathar reason and the wild, unpredictable crimson slashes of human endeavor. They were not opposing forces. They were two parts of a new, terrifying, and exhilarating whole. The future of galactic commerce and perhaps galactic relations would not be one of pure logic or pure chaos, but a complex, volatile dance between the two. And Xylo, for the first time in his life, had absolutely no idea what would happen next. The prospect was unsettling, but as he looked at Telek's inspired expression, he found it was also, strangely, stimulating. The galaxy had just gotten a lot bigger and infinitely more interesting.